Oh, God. So yeah, we only have like 40 minutes today, but if I think this goes well, I may do this more frequently because on a radio show, it's so much more difficult to go in depth. Radio show is different because the radio show gives me the opportunity to answer a specific question. You know, is your dog doing this? Is your cat doing that? But it really, over the years, hit me that I would say 85 to 90% of the calls I get are people that either adopted, failed at foster, took the dogs off the streets, out of the shelters, abusive conditions, or they just like Joy have a sign in front of the house that's vacancy. You know, just come on in. But that's basically having known that, and then working at the shelters. And we were talking about this before you got on, Joy, is that for so many years I would spend at least 16 to 20 hours a week, specifically at a shelter, working with the animals there. And so many of the animals coming into the shelters had no issues other than the morons they live with. So it occurred to me that a lot of people assume, and the thing that drives me absolutely crazy is when people say, including trainers and behaviorists and veterinarians, well, you adopted the dog and you got the dog here and it comes with baggage. I hate that term baggage. There's no such thing as baggage. Do they have issues? Absolutely, they can have issues. But I have issues too. That doesn't mean they can't be resolved. I'll give you an example.
Right.
So many dogs and cats, including my own two, Molly and Willie, who drive me absolutely crazy. Molly and Willie, we have them a little over a year and a half now, I guess. And their behavior has totally changed from the day I brought them into the house till now. And a lot of people don't understand the concept that what they're taking out of the shelter is not necessarily going to be what they're going to have 6 months, 8 months, or a year down the road. We don't always know what the background is going to be. There's no way of knowing that in many cases, but we have to kind of be like Kreskin. We have to be to interpret their body language and figure out, did they come from a home where they were abused? It turns out that Willie and Molly didn't. I didn't realize that at the beginning. Did they come from a home where they were totally ignored? Did they come from a home where they were getting tremendous amount of negative attention, where it was better to be bad than better to be good? Was the home chaotic? Was everything punitive in the home? And a lot of these behaviors, for example, I was talking to someone this morning and they were talking about a dog that growled. And I'm sure you guys all worked with dogs that growled, okay? And they were angry and they were ready to take the dog back to the shelter because the dog growled at them. And they thought the dog was growling because he was aggressive. And I said, in reality, you should thank the dog for growling. Because what the dog is doing is letting you know he's either uncomfortable or in an uncomfortable position. An aggressive dog doesn't growl, an aggressive dog bites. So the growling is actually a way of the dog letting you know to, hey, back off, I'm uncomfortable here. And what most trainers and behaviorists do is they focus on correcting that aggressive behavior or that growling by yelling and screaming and choking or whatever they do. In reality, the right thing to do is to try to figure out why that behavior is there, what situation provoked the dog or the cat to react in a certain way, and resolve it from that perspective. You know me, everything with me is redirection and a tremendous amount of patience. So very often the dog stays with someone for 3, 4, 5 weeks and has never been socialized or exposed or understand the concept of what's going on or living with people and other animals. And that's when the dog 3 or 4 weeks later winds up back at the shelter. And, and you know, you guys know as well as I do that once a dog winds up at a shelter and they get into that shelter routine, you know, it's real difficult to get them those forever homes. So it occurred to me that people don't realize that some of the aggressive behavior, and I'm going to talk more about that, is a dog or a cat's way of, it's kind of like a mechanism to protect themselves. They don't know how else to protect themselves. They've been either, as I said, abused or whatever. I'll give you a prime example. Many of the questions I get on the radio shows have to do with housebreaking issues. And so many dogs wind up back at shelters because of housebreaking issues. And what drives me crazy is maybe this dog has never been housebroken. Maybe this dog has never been inside a house. Maybe this dog doesn't know from the concept of not to go where he has to stay because he was chained up and he had no choice and became comfortable staying with his own mess, and therefore he's used to it. So, and then what happens is the dog comes into a home and the dog has its first accident, and let's say the dog has an accident right here, and what do people do is they take the dog over to it and they say, no, bad dog, phooey, what did you do? Wait till daddy comes home. So what's happening at that point is, number one, is you're paying a lot of attention to the dog. Even though it's negative, the dog is getting a lot of attention. That's number one. And number two, what you're telling the dog is that it's bad to go in that location. At no point are you getting across to the dog, it's the act of going inside that's bad, not the fact that you went in that one location. So by taking the dog over there, in reality, what you're doing is saying, it's bad to go here, so nah, I'll go here, here, or here the next day. And that's when the problem starts, and the people say, you know what, I've had enough of the dog. So in terms of housebreaking a dog, kind of take into consideration, give him some time to adjust. Take into consideration, we don't know the background, if he was ever housebroken or not. Watch or confine. You hear me say it over and over again. When a new dog comes into a household, watch or confine. And the minute he starts to eliminate or circle like he's going to, take him outside, sing him a song, give him a lot of praise, and that's going to make all the difference in the world. But it drives me crazy, and there's no such thing. Has anyone ever met a dog that could not be housebroken?
Nope.
I mean, I've worked with dogs that have their monthly accident. But they can be housebroken, and to wind up at a shelter,
right?
And the worst part is the older dog that winds up at a shelter that's been totally housebroken his whole life, then all of a sudden is starting to have accidents because of either arthritis or internal problems, and again, that reaction is to bring the dog to the shelter. That's what really pisses me off about shelters, is that I understand the concept, but if every shelter had someone, and I'm not talking about the dog trainer around the corner, but if every shelter had someone who would take the time to spend time with the adoptees, with the people that are adopting, and explain to them what I just explained to you. Anticipate there's going to be this. Anticipate there may be housebreaking. Anticipate there may be some growling. Because if you know what to expect, it makes the transition a lot easier. If you don't know what to expect, then that's where the dog or the cat winds up at that shelter. And in terms of the aggressive behavior, which is probably the second biggest problem, is that so many of these dogs either were in an abusive home or a home where they received no attention whatsoever. And from there, they go to a shelter where there's all these other chaotic dogs and craziness going on. And from there, you know, and if God forbid they should bark, they get squirted with a fire hydrant hose or God knows what. So what happens is basically these dogs now go into a home. You go through that little bit of a honeymoon period where the dog's just happy, he's got a warm place to sleep in and a square meal. And then as they start coming out of it a little bit, because they learn through association, certain things that you do, they may associate with negative things in the past. For example, I worked with a dog not too long ago. And when I say I worked with a dog, these are just people I've known. I don't do any private training anymore of behavior. And they had the dog, and every time they went to put the shoe on, the dog would literally attack their foot.
Wow.
And so, you know, I just have to assume at that point that the dog was kicked or had a shoe thrown at him on a regular basis. So she hired trainers, she went to behaviorists, and they said, this is what you do when the dog goes to chew on your shoe, jerk the dog around, tell him no, phooey, bad dog, whatever they do. And in reality, my response was, let's take that shoe that the dog's fearful of or apprehensive of and turn that into a positive thing where the dog actually looks forward to seeing that shoe. So what I did is I took the shoes and I recommended that she, you know, put the shoe down just before she feeds the dog, or let the dog sniff the shoe. Dog love going for walks, sniff the shoe just before she goes on the walk, take the shoe off, put it back on, take the shoe off, put it back on. Is it going to resolve itself overnight? No, but it's going to resolve itself in a matter of time. And that's what I don't understand. And I know you guys, I know you're involved, Maria, and I know that Julie's involved with behavior and training. The dogs going back to shelters are the ones that are scare me the worst. But the ones that really have the toughest time, it's not even the aggressive dog. And for you guys, you know, that have rescued a lot of dogs, it's not even the aggressive dog. It's generally the shy or the fearful dog, because that's the type of dog that is reacting in an assertive way, not due to any deep assertiveness inside of him, but he's reacting that way because he doesn't know how to react. He's afraid, he's fearful, he's shy, he's never been socialized or exposed. So what do you do with a dog like that? What you do with a dog like that is you build up the confidence.
That they don't come. Oh, sorry. I tell people that they don't come with an instruction book. They don't know what's expected of them. And we have to teach them what it is that we want them to do.
Exactly, but they need to realize that the most important thing they can do is, number one, give the dog or the cat the opportunity to unwind a little bit. That's number one.
Yeah.
And once they have that opportunity, the next thing to do is to really build up the dog's confidence. And you know, obedience training is used by so many people to control their dog.
I know.
I've always used obedience training as a way of building the dog's self-esteem and self-image.
Yep,
exactly.
Me too.
Because now what's happening is he's getting a positive response for things that he's doing the right way. And that's really important, rather than the focus of so many people being on the negative. So shy and fearful dog, another reason they're giving up so much more. And anxiety, you know, it's like before I went on the air with you guys, I was anxious. I'm drinking decaf coffee, believe it or not. and the reason for that is because this is new to me. I've never done Zoom before. That's why Julie's here. Listen, you know what I say. If it doesn't pee, I don't deal with it. And I expect a biscuit and a pat on the head.
Good for trying. Good job.
But
I do Zoom all the time.
The other thing, another reason that so many dogs wind up at shelters is something we call resource guarding.
Yes.
You know, the dog that grabs a toy and is overprotective of it, or the dog that's overprotective over his food. Well, maybe the dog was fed once a week. Maybe the dog never had a toy in his life. Of course, they can be more protective and more possessive over it. That's why, and I say this so often, is when you have a new dog coming into a home, you never give it one of anything. Never give it one of anything. You always give it several of anything. So if you're buying a toy, buy 3. If you're feeding it, feed it out of 2 dishes or 3 dishes, not just out of 1 dish. And the importance of that is so the dog realizes it's not that important to be possessive over this, because there's something over here and there's something over here as well. See, if everyone that adopted a dog, and I don't want to sound like a martyr here, but you know, I've been doing this for a few weeks. If everyone just was understanding what to expect when they adopt a dog, it would make the return almost disappear entirely. Because, you know, I say this all the time, is there's no such thing as a bad dog. There's dogs that have been dealt a bad hand. And so resource guarding, destructive behavior. How many dogs wind up back at the shelter because they're chewing, because they're ripping things apart? How many times do I hear that? And again, I want you to understand that destructive behavior isn't your dog sitting there saying, they left me, man, watch this, I'm going to rip the house apart. No, those Gucci shoes, they're going in my mouth as soon as they're gone. So in other words, it's not anticipatory destruction, it's anxiety provoked.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
we live in an instant gratification society.
Yeah.
And if the animal doesn't do exactly, I have my tag on my emails, what you said years ago, if you want a perfect pet, get one with batteries.
Exactly.
Because we live in a society where they better get it right or they're out.
And so people need to understand that destructive behavior is also part of adjustment.
Yeah.
I mean, a dog's not going to say, well, I'm anxious, let me, you know, sew, or let me build something, or let me do this, or let me do that. Their way of alleviating anxiety or fear is orally. So so the chewing of a dog is an anxiety relief. So if your dog is chewing and people say to their dog and yell at their dog for chewing, you're actually increasing the anxiety level because the dog's already anxious. That's why he's chewing in the first place.
Yeah, Yeah.
So people really need to focus on the whys. That's really, really critical, as
Mhm.
well as the antisocial behavior.
Yeah.
My dog hates other dogs. We're bringing a new cat into the household, and the dog won't accept the new cat. Um,
How do you know?
yeah, well, it's all part. It's kind of like an adjustment period. I mean, people
Yep.
sometimes, I grew up in an interesting household, probably the most psychotic household in the world. There was always at least 14 or 15, 15 people living in the house. My sister moved back with her kids. I had one grandfather who was a double amputee. We got him this electric wheelchair. I used to race him up and down the block with my folks. We had such a crazy family. And when I got back from overseas, there was no place for Warren. The house was full. So I went to it's a funny story. I went to the boiler room in my mother's house down in the basement. And there used to be a group of stores in New York, Connecticut, New Jersey called Pergament, which was like a home improvement,
Yes.
kind of like a Home Depot store.
Yes.
And I bought this shag carpet that sticks on, and I put it on the ceiling. I put it on the walls. I put it here. I put it there. And I figured to make it cool, I think I hung a picture of James Taylor on the ceiling. He's probably still in the house back then. But the thing is that when you grow up, and the way I grew up, I needed calm time. I needed time away from human beings. And I found that time behind my house on Long Island was a creek, and it was there were, muskrats and rats and geese, Canada geese and different types of ducks and just all kinds of wildlife and lizards. And so that's where I would spend my time. So my understanding of animals doesn't come from my book knowledge, although that's there. My understanding of animals comes from observation. And you never become the perfect dog trainer. You never become the perfect behaviorist, because every single day, I learn every week from my audience, from people calling me on the show saying, well, Warren, I've done this or I've done that. It either teaches me what to tell people not to do or something that may have worked in a different scenario. So those are the things that are really critical. And the lack of training. Training to me, and it makes me crazy. When I started, there maybe 5 people in the country doing training, in-home training. Maybe. There was no one in New York at all. No one. Maybe 5, and everyone was sending their dogs to Captain Haggerty or Lou Burke or this guy or that guy, sending their dogs away to be trained. I said, what good is it for the dog to listen to me? So what trainers would do is they would, and it's a funny story, because when I started, other people would compete with me, and they'd show up at the person's house in an Armani suit and a tie, and they'd evaluate the dog. I had no money, no clothes. I showed up in a cut-off fatigue shirt with my sergeant stripes on, and I would say, here to train your dog. But what I did that was different is I didn't evaluate the dog by sitting on the couch. I evaluated the dog by taking the dog outside and working with the dog and letting the people see the results. And I explained to them, just because the dog looks like Rin Tin Tin with me now, that's my profession. That's what I do. Don't expect the dog in a few days to respond to you the same way the dog is responding to me.
Right.
So many trainers have this ego. Look, the dog comes when he's called, drop on, recall, out of sight, stay. None of that matters. None of that matters. What matters is the dog and the guardians are happy together, and the dog's really, really well adjusted. And so many people miss that opportunity. And so I think one of the things I want to do in the future, and again, I said this is my first Zoom thing, is I want to make sure that people have the opportunity, and I'm going to focus on specifics if I decide to do these more frequently. Like today's kind of like an overview. I might focus one week on as the pandemic gets down, I might focus on abandonment issues or separation anxiety.
We're going to have a lot of that stuff with all these animals that were adopted or purchased during the pandemic. I'm seeing it in my little daycare, that behaviors are very weird.
If people would only start preparing now for the inevitable, it would make all the difference in the world. In other words, start leaving their dog or their cat, even if they're home for short periods of time. But we're going to deal with the specifics. I actually wrote so much stuff down. It's amazing to me that I wrote all this stuff down. But we're going to be dealing with specific things in the future. But I want everyone to understand this, okay? Having a dog or having a cat should be a pleasure.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, I just don't get it. So many people consider it a responsibility. It should be the joy. It should be the concept of, listen, so now Willie, my little brown one, who weighs 11 pounds soaking wet, and not even, I think he's 9 pounds now, all of a sudden started growling. You know, what is this all about? Do I need to call a trainer? All of a sudden, Willie's growling at me. And I kind of figured out, I'm figuring out exactly how abused he was. I mean, they cut his tail and his ears without anesthesia. Clip his nails down to the point of blood. I won't even clip his nails at this point. His nails are so long that I can clip them myself now, but I don't want it to have that negative experience. So what I'm going to do is when I take him in to have his teeth cleaned, I'm going to have him do it at that point as well. But I want Willie to understand that the growling is I'm not angry at him. I understand that maybe the person that picked you up before me threw you against the wall or did this or did that. So little by little now, he's coming around. So now when he growls at me, I just totally ignore it. I know it's not that big a deal. I just totally ignore it. And sometimes I'll say to him, do you know who you're growling at? Do you have any idea who you're growling at? Molly, on the other hand, is like they're so different, yet they've been together their whole lives. Molly is like a mush. I mean, if I didn't force her to get up and walk, she'd lie on your head all day long. That's just the way Molly is. And the two of them are so bonded, and that's another thing that makes me nuts. How are people not adopting bonded pairs of dogs? How could you do that? I mean, I'm glad the one dog has a home, but in reality, Julie, you're the one. Joy, you're the one there. Having 10 dogs is no more difficult than having a couple. Once you know,
absolutely
I've had 30 at a time. And yeah, the food was a little more expensive and the poop bags were a little bit bigger. But it's all part of understanding that this here's the problem in a nutshell. When there was only 5 of us training pretty much in the country, that was a good thing. Even though a lot of the other trainers were, you know, the old, I mean, I can show you books that I have here that were written by the Disney trainers that you would not believe. If your dog is digging holes, take his head, fill the hole with water, stick the dog's head in the hole till it bubbles. And this is the guy who trained Old Red. And if the dog jumps the fence, here's what you do. You take a piece of string. I'm serious. You take a piece of string, you tie the string just long enough to reach the dog's butt. You take a big stick, tie it to that string, so when the dog goes to jump the fence, the stick gets caught between his legs, whacking him back and forth. And if that doesn't work, try a slingshot.
Oh, God.
But so that was bad enough, but it's not as bad as what's going on now, because ever since this whole alpha dog training thing started coming up, everyone, I mean, the most difficult thing in the world to find, other than an open restaurant in Southern California, is someone who is not a dog trainer,
right?
Who's not a dog trainer. And bad advice is worse than no advice. I mean, when I hear, you hear me say this, you paid someone to come to your house, and now you got to call me on the radio show to find out how to resolve the issue. You just paid $1,000. I feel like sending these people a bill sometimes. I really, really do. But the thing is that there's so many people out there. I don't know what the armchair dog trainers, behaviorists, and what's happening is because of this whole dominant approach. I think it was last week or the week before, someone called me up, and I really kind of laced into them about this dominance. This whole dominance approach has created a situation. Here's the example. I'll use this example. If everyone in the house is telling the dog what to do, the husband tells the dog what to do, the wife tells the dog what to do, the grandmother tells the dog what to do, the kids tell the dog what to do. Everyone tells the dog what to do. So this is really politically incorrect, but I'm going to say it anyway. Okay? Too many chiefs and no Indians. So if everyone else is challenging, if everyone else is the alpha to this dog, of course, when the dog goes outside, he's going to challenge whatever he can. He's got to have some position in that group. So everyone's telling the dog what to do all the time. Okay, so this whole pack theory, yeah, dogs pack animals. Yeah, they are pack animals. Where do they come from? They come from an animal called the myacus that split off into feline and split off into canine. And you can go even deeper than that. Why are certain dogs more pack oriented than others? Well, there's certain schools of thought that certain breeds of dogs, like the shepherds and the working breeds of dogs, they came from the wolf. And yet the animals like beagles and the Pharaoh hound, the Beathan hound, and breeds like that, the Gaisons, or the hunting dogs with their eyes, the Gaisons, they came from a different background, more of the hyena background. That's why beagles are so much less pack-oriented than, let's say, some of the working breeds are.
Or the African dogs.
The way they were genetically right. So it's so important, and that's important for me to know and you guys know, but it's not that important for everyone to know. The important thing to know is that there's no such thing as a problem that can't be resolved. There are problems that will never be 100%, but on the same token, there are problems that will get better a little bit at a time. I mean, that's what we hope for, and that's so important. The other thing is the food aggression, and that's another thing I hear all the time on. I'm trying to get to as many, and the food is again the dog that might have been starved, the dog that my two, Molly and Willie. Willie, the skinny guy. Willie will wait and is a very tough eater, and I think Willie was kind of pushed away. I said, I don't know the background on my guys. I just don't know the background. I think they were from a breeding situation and a hoarding situation. I see that, Debbie, I see your dog is adorable. A hoarding situation. And so, again, you're never going to know the background, but the important thing is what we can do from this point further. So all of those things make all the difference in the world. And sometimes the biggest problem is when you're walking your dog, you rescue the dog, you're taking the dog for a walk down the street, and the dog shows aggression towards another dog, or aggression towards another person, or aggression towards a skateboarder. And people are saying, well, that's a bad dog. Why is the dog doing that? Well, take a dog that's never been loved, never been exposed, never been socialized, probably abused, all of a sudden found, again, politically incorrect, found its Prince Charming. The person feeds him, tells him he loves him, grooms him, walks him. And so in the past, this dog was probably challenged by everyone to get any type of attention. So now that he has this person, they can easily become very territorial or possessive over that particular person. That's why the socialization from day one is so critical. So the dog learns to understand the concept that it's the concept that people coming towards you are not necessarily going to harm you. If they're going to harm you, they know automatically. So they'll pick up on that. Anyway, let me say goodbye to you guys now. Bless you for joining me today. I appreciate you.
So much fun.
Thank
you.
Hugs and kisses. Hugs and kisses.
Saturday, and just let people know that we're going to do this more frequently.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And know that you are important, and that you have, as I said earlier, you have changed and helped a lot of lives.
Oh,
I'm
definitely.
with you 4 hours every Saturday. What a
Well,
boring
you
life
guys have no idea what therapy you are for me.
And Julie, I'm glad to see you're feeling better.
Ask Julie
Thank
how much
you.
I need therapy.
Yes, I'm doing much better.
Thank goodness.
Guys, have a great one. Thank you so much.
You
Thank
too,
you.
Warren.
Bye-bye
Bye-bye.
now.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.